Join us as we sit down with remarkable individuals from various walks of life who faced their fair share of obstacles and emerged with positivity. Each episode, you'll hear inspiring stories, actionable tips, and wisdom that can supercharge your own journey when using adversity as motivation. Let's learn together. Welcome to Lauer Power.
Hello, and thanks for listening to another episode of Lauer Power. Alongside Chad Lauer, my name is Chad Evans. 2 Chads for the price of 1. Good to see you, Chad.
Good to see you too, Chad.
It's a pleasure. How are you?
Pleasure. I'm doing really well, man. I really cannot complain. I'm ready to enjoy some spring weather. How about you?
I already have enjoyed some spring weather.
Yeah. You are doing some fishing, some golfing.
Well, trout first, golf second.
I'm in.
That's how I roll. So I went trout fishing, caught a couple. Now it's golf season. Just in time for the Masters.
Exactly. What a great week.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite weeks of the year. And by the way, there's only one person that has a better voice than you, and I'm sorry to break the news to you.
How dare you?
It's Jim Nantz.
Oh, well, yeah.
He's the only one.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know.
In my opinion, the only person that has a better voice than you is Jim Nantz.
So when you're saying Jim Nantz retires, I'm calling the Masters?
I mean, if hopefully they have a tryout. Do they have tryouts for that stuff?
I don't know. Who do we need to tag in this podcast?
I mean, I'm selling you right now because I truly believe that.
Well,
he's amazing, by the way.
Yeah, he's the best. I will also say this before we get started. We want you to subscribe. If you're listening to this podcast as we use adversity as motivation, please subscribe and take us with you no matter where you go. We would appreciate it. Listen, this is a good episode. This might be the best episode.
I agree. I hate to compare them, but we just keep getting better every week.
Agreed.
Listen, real quick, not to get into the episode, but I think it's important to tell people why we asked them to subscribe. I don't think folks understand it. And as a marketer, I need to tell them. Nobody really tells you, so we're going to be real here. On YouTube in particular, if you get 500 subscribers and 3,000 watch hours, you qualify to make money. It's not a lot of money. It's a couple cents here and there. But why people ask you to subscribe is for that reason. And then you get automatic updates when we publish something new, etc. So when we ask about subscriptions and comments and liking, it's because we're playing the algorithm and we want to get our content out to more people, Chad.
Okay.
All right. Just making sure.
Okay. There you go. Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah. Now, our guests today are truly inspirational. And I think that they got us back to our original mission, which is using adversity as motivation. Eric and Kari Boyer have been through pretty much everything and anything you could deal with in your life. And they are the owners of Ivy Coffee Shop in Sunbury, Underdog Construction, or Underdog Electric in Mifflinburg, Pennsylvania. Eric is the assistant pastor at Calvary Tabernacle, and they are starting a church in Shamokin, Pennsylvania called Refuge Church, Chad.
That's fantastic. I'm really excited for this family, and they're really cool people.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it amazing how you and I started this mission of, starting the podcast, but in particular, our passion of the coal region, and we're meeting other people, and we're helping to create momentum in town.
Yeah, we have this community within a community that's really trying to make a difference and make their mark on said community. And
we're going to do it. So without further ado, welcome Eric and Kari Boyer. And I'm so excited to have them. And honestly, it's an awesome day because it's our first time we actually have 2 people on the podcast at once. And it's a couple, and they're entrepreneurs, and they've been through major adversity, and they've used it as motivation. So we were actually introduced to each other by Danielle Houts, who was on our podcast, episode number 3, which was about Oasis and Shamokin. So anybody who's followed the podcast to date, I must tell you before we get started, Eric and Carrie and I met last week for coffee at Ivy Coffee in Sunbury, and I learned about them, and they were absolutely perfect guests for our story and what we're trying to do here at Lauer Power Podcast. So I learned about their adversity and some of the great things they're doing in the community, and I can't wait to share their story with you today. So welcome, Eric and Kari.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Good morning.
Yeah, really excited. So, listen, you currently own Ivy Coffee in Sunbury. Really, you're both working really hard at that. You also own Underdog Electric in Mifflinburg. And, you're very active in your church. And Eric, you're the assistant pastor at Calvary Tabernacle, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about why you're so entrepreneurial.
Honestly, out of necessity. In 2008, when everything just took a dump and life just kind of threw us into a curve, it didn't really start then, but that was basically when I can pinpoint back to where it kind of took roots. Because obviously we were slave to whoever we worked for at the time, and everything just kind of fell apart, and we didn't want to be bound to everybody else's decisions. And when we can work out and do our own thing and make choices that can directly affect our lives more profoundly, it just works out better. If you can take control of your own situation, your own destiny, you're going to have better outcomes always.
I love that. Carrie, how about you?
Well, back to kind of what he said in 2008, he didn't add that we were homeless and we were living in our pastor's living room on a twin mattress with 4 of us. So that kind of was what propelled it. And so I have been a stay-at-home mom. I couldn't afford to put my kids in daycare, and I homeschooled them. I was with them for 17 years. Our oldest just graduated early. And so we actually wanted to start Ivy Coffee in 2020. Well, that wasn't really the time to start a coffee shop. So last year, I was like, I think it's time. I think it's time to start. And we started with our trailer, and it just kind of blew up. And then January came, and we're like, here's a brick and mortar. And I was like 2 years out from a brick and mortar. And then, the opportunity presented itself in January, and we just felt that it was the time. And so we took it, and it's been a wild ride since. That's
awesome. And really the reason why I asked that is, for me especially, and folks who've listened to the podcast, entrepreneurship is therapy. Yep. Right? I use that.
It's healing.
I use that as healing, and I also use it to, I think kind of help me with my addictive personality, yep. Which, you guys know, my family has battled with that in the past. So talk to us a little bit about your adversity. Like, how can you tell us a little bit about what you've dealt with in your life? Let's go right there.
Okay. So, like I said, I was a child of two alcoholics that never got along. They always fought. They ended up divorcing when I was 10. I went to live with my mom. My brother went to live with my dad, which was more dramatic than you would think. When your brother is your best friend, it's challenging not to have him there daily. And I think that was a huge impact on who I became. But even at an early age, like those things kind of help push me into do different things. At the age of 12, I started becoming an entrepreneur. Now, bear with me. I started selling anything. I was selling porn from a kid's dad that I had found. Okay, and then I went on to selling any drug you could find. I was selling it and using. There was probably, at one point I calculated over 27 different drugs I had used. Coke, crack, heroin, you name it. I probably ingested it in my body. And of course, when you have an addictive personality like that, it's very challenging to find alternate sources of an outlet when you know those things are damaging to your life and you're constantly waking up every day wondering, am I going to get a bad batch, or am I going to, what's going to happen? I remember being in Harrisburg buying crack, and I got comfortable being in that situation. I turned my car off, let my window down. Guy comes up to the car, puts a gun to my neck, asks for all my money. I was smart enough at the time, though. I had 2 different money stashes. I had $100 in one pocket and another $1,000 in the other pocket. So I gave him the $100 and he left me alone. I went out bought another $1,000 worth of crack, smoked up with some random people I didn't know, took the rest back and sold it. So that was obviously not good for anybody.
And Eric, how old were you? How old were you when this happened?
At that point, I was probably 20.
20. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So I used drugs all the way up till I was like 21.
And when did you start using them?
About 6th grade.
6th grade. Okay. And that's what I asked that because I think there's sort of like these preconceived notions of, you know, what somebody who uses drugs looks like, or, you know, how old they are. Right. Yep. And just looking at you right now, right. You don't look like that person. And I want people to understand
Absolutely.
that, right. Because you don't look like that person, right. But you were dealing with some really tough stuff in your life. Yep. Right. And tell us about what that was like. Like, why do you think if you had to look back, if you had to go back, why did you turn to that lifestyle?
I mean, in hindsight, at that time, I didn't have any realization on why, but there was always a hole for everybody. And me being a Christian, I like the term, and it makes sense, and it resounds with me, is that there's a God-sized hole in everybody. And until you can find something or someone, namely for me particularly, it was the Lord. He helped fill that void, that need, that longing for something more, and he filled that ultimately. And
those people out there right now in the position that you are at 20 years old and struggling, what's your message to them?
You have to want to. That's the main thing. You have to want to get beyond where you're at. Nothing changes if nothing changes. You have to step outside of where you're at. Sometimes it's going to be a dramatic change that makes it happen, but you got to ultimately make that decision before too many of your friends die, before you end up in a hospital, before you OD and die. I've had so many friends that have ended up dead because of the things that I had sold them. So I live with that too as well. Because when I was, like I said, I was dealing everything. I tried not to sell heroin or anything that I thought was really bad, but I know people that I sold weed to for the first time, ended up growing up doing heroin and have died. So that's played a lot into my need and desire to reconcile those wrongs by doing more good.
It's funny because you said you have to want to, and I lost my father at the age of 17 because of his addiction, and I was 17 years old. But I remember as a child going to rehab with him, right? And my mother and I and my sister, we wanted nothing more than to fix it. Yep. And we just couldn't do it, right? I talk about this on the previous podcast. We just couldn't do it, right? So I have family members right now struggling with addiction, right? And the reason why I ask you that question is, some of them might listen to this. Why are you willing to tell your story? There's so many people would never admit that they dealt drugs the way you just did. Right. Why? Why are you willing to admit that and own it?
Because we got to be real. This world is full of so many fake people out there trying to present themselves with this high on a pedestal, untouchable character that they've never done anything wrong. And that's not what people connect with. People want somebody who's real and who's been through things and have experienced life's adversities and have overcome them, because then it gives them hope that they can do so themselves. There's people that are out there that hopefully will listen to this. And I hope that when you hear this, that you understand that you have the ability to change your own course, and it doesn't need to be anything super dramatic. You just got to take the small steps day by day to make that right choice.
Amazing. And Carrie, were you with Eric during these times?
I was not.
You were not?
No,
okay.
I actually met him when Golden Corral was still a thing on the Strip.
Oh yeah, I used to go there for breakfast.
He was a cook and I was a waitress, and I met him and we got engaged, and 2 months later, and then got married. So do not recommend. Take your time. Make sure it's the right person. No, I did not. Now, he was kind of at the tail end of all of this because I was 19 and he was 21. And I told him when he first started showing interest that I would not date him if he was into drugs. Like, it was going to be one or the other. And so it pretty much was almost a snap decision for him. And that doesn't mean that it was easy and it wasn't a struggle after that, But there was a time he had an accident at Woodmode, and that's how he lost his vision in his eye. And he had prayed and he had asked God, if you will just send me somebody, send me someone to love, send me someone that I can help take care of. And then literally, 9 months later, we met. And so I think it was, him holding himself accountable to that. And it was just all the perfect timing. So he was kind of on the tail end of all of that. And I was dealing with my own, trauma at the beginning of our relationship. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and your relationship's inspiring, and I know you're both so real, and I know it's not all roses and butterflies, right? No. So you've also been through some really tough stuff, and do you think that's why you connected?
I do. I went to Milton Hershey School when I was 11, and honestly, that saved my life. I had been through every portion of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental, literally you name it, and I had walked through it. My stepdad, when I was younger, I think around the age of 4, for multiple years, raped me. And we like to pretty it up when it comes to children. We called it child molestation, but it's rape. And so he got 30 days in jail, and I got a lifetime of trauma to heal from. And so that had a lot of ramifications on our marriage, because when we first got married, I could not give myself fully to my husband because I had this skewed view of a man's love. And so I didn't understand it. And I will share, I don't know if I've shared this really ever other than maybe 1 or 2 people, but when I was 6 and I was in the thick of this, I still had such a peace. Like, I didn't go to church. I didn't know any higher power. I didn't know who God was, nothing. But I had a peace. And so at 6 years old, I had a dream. And in that dream, I was in like a school auditorium, and I was standing up on the platform, and I was speaking. And it was just full, like thousands and thousands of people. And what I was speaking about was what I was going through in that moment. And I didn't know that that would be my future. But I think in a way, it was God showing me, I'm going to hold on to you. And I'm going to make something good out of this. And so I've always had it in the back of my mind that if my story can save just one person, then it's worth it. Like you, I wouldn't change. All of the terrible abuse that I went through, I wouldn't change it because it made me more loving, it made me more compassionate, it made me a more understanding person. And so I can relate to people that someone else may not be able to relate to. So.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, your message is powerful. You can probably see from me because, like, again, you're willing to talk about it. And I know there are people out there who've gone through that and are silent.
Right. And there's this stigma of shame.
Yes.
Well, why would I feel shame? I didn't do anything.
Right. I mean, it's just like.
And I think what it is the abuser places that shame on us. And we're living under this blanket. And so we don't know any different until someone comes in and shines light on it. And then you're like, I've been living under this blanket of shame for so long, and I needed to get out from under it. And so that leads me to when we first got married, a couple months into our marriage, I just kept feeling like I have to call this man that did this to me. I have to call him. And as much, there's this battle between the spiritual and the flesh. And in my flesh, I was like, absolutely not. He can just rot. I could care less about him, but it wasn't about him. It was about me. And there had to be this release. I had to pull that blanket off. And so we're sitting on the bathroom floor. I have no idea why we were sitting in the bathroom. But we find his number, and I called him, and I said, Chuck, I forgive you. And he started to try and have a conversation. I said, no. All I needed to do was call you and tell you I forgave you. And so I hang up the phone. A couple months later, we get a phone call from the Virginia State Police. He had passed away. And so any normal person would be like, oh, good, he got what was coming to him. No, I sobbed, and I cried because the value of just one person. I have no idea what me calling him that day might have done for him. He dealt with sexual abuse in his childhood too. So maybe me calling him was the release for him to forgive himself. We just never know.
I'll tell you what, you two inspire me as much as anybody who's been on our podcast. So I can't thank you enough for being so vulnerable. And I know that, we're going to get this message out. And I think by both of you being real, it's going to make a difference, right? So the podcast is about using adversity as motivation. The leadership topic of the day is servant leadership.
Right.
So, Eric, I'm just going to turn to you because, you've been an assistant pastor, right?
Yep.
And you're going to start a church in Shamokin. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the plan.
So why? Tell me why. Why Shamokin and why is that the plan?
Well, if I had to be 100% honest, it wasn't like I said, yeah, I want to go start a church in Shamokin. That's my dream. But when you're trying to follow after the Lord and what he wants from us, which we should all strive to do, is it makes you flexible and more open to things to come to pass. And ultimately, the Lord opened the door because that's where he knew I would fit best and I would be able to have the most impact, because that town is ravished with addiction and all types of abuse and heartache and sorrow and pain. And I feel like that we have been set up for this. I mean, our life has molded us and shaped us in a way that we're going to be so effective in that city because we can relate to so many people on so many levels. We've been poor, we've been homeless, we've been addicted, we've been abused, you name it. So, and that community strikes me as that point, or the type of people who have been through that, but they're also overcomers. There's a very strong community there. In just a short amount of time, I've been trying to spend as much time in Shamokin as I can to get to know the people, and they're good people.
Yeah.
But they've just been locked up mentally. I feel that their thought process has been ingrained that this is where they are and this is where they're going to stay, and they're never going to get out of that. Yep. And I don't mean geographically. I mean their mindset. Their mindset has to change, and I'm hoping we can bring some hope to that, because ultimately, I'm not a name it, claim it, blab it, grab it person whatsoever. I believe God does honor, your prayers and your requests. Don't get me wrong, but until we allow him to speak to us and through us and to mold us and shape our thought process, we're going to keep trying to do the same thing over and over again. And it's not going to be productive. And the people in that city need to see that they can overcome this mindset that they're less than, or that they're not, able to accomplish anything great. And I think there's greatness there. Yeah. And that city just has my heart, because I could be, like the guy on the corner, begging for money, that's homeless and doesn't have a place to go, doesn't have family, and I want to be that beacon of light.
Yeah, that's just amazing, because if you've listened to our previous podcast, like Chad has done so much in Shamokin. Yep. Okay. I moved back a year and a half ago, and I'm there. I'm present. Yep. Okay. And for me, I mostly live there on the weekends, right? So I got to kind of see both ends, and there's some really, really good people. Yep. There's some really, really wealthy people. Right. Okay. Yep. But overall, there's a lot of need. Yep. Okay. And I want to support you guys in that mission any way that I can. And I'm super excited for you to be real, right, Eric, and for you to be real, Carrie. And connect with people and be a place where they can walk in with no judgment and say, what, these folks actually dealt with this, right. And again, I dealt with it I dealt with it through the child's eyes. Yeah. Okay. I never dealt with it myself, but I was the child, of that. So, I'm super, super proud of you guys. I really, really am. What else? Can you guys tell me what else is on the horizon? What other plans do you have? Anything else that you want to tell the audience?
I don't know. Our life is like, it just changes at the drop of a dime. We just try to stay flexible and know that, our plans are not ours. And, we just want to be willing to go and do whatever it is that the Lord wants us to do. And, we named the Shamokin Church Refuge Church.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
And to me, that has just been in the back of my head for so many years. Like, I want this place to be a safe haven. I want it to be a refuge. I want it to be a place of safety where they come in and they don't have to deal with addiction, and they don't have to deal with abuse, and they don't have to deal with trauma mindsets. And they can come in and they can just drop everything right there at their seat and just let healing happen. And so we want to be able to be a source of that healing. I think when you've gone through so much, you have a choice. You know, it's amazing how two kids can grow up in the same household, go through the same exact thing, turn out so totally different because it's their mindset. I knew early on, I will not be a victim. I'm not going to be named by what happened to me. Carrie was abused. Carrie was this. No. Carrie is an overcomer. You know what I mean? Like, I sought healing. It didn't just happen overnight. And so we've got to be active participants in our own healing. And so I want to be able to be somebody who helps bring somebody else to that healing, where they can kind of see light in these glasses, these shades come off of their eyes, and there's new life on the other side of this. And I think, like he said, we can get stuck in this, oh, there's nothing more for me. This is it. We had that conversation about young kids and showing them, like, there's so much more. There's a bigger world. That, you know, there's so much more that there is to offer you. And so we want to be able to be a source of hope, a dwelling place, a refuge, a place of healing, all of those, a shelter for these people. So.
Yeah. And let's get into the servant leadership piece. Everybody calls themselves a servant leader, right? I was just telling you guys, right? Like, it sounds good. It's now the sexy term.
Yeah.
If I go on LinkedIn, every CEO is the servant. Right. Everybody's a servant leader.
The ones
right?
who don't have to serve have it on there.
Yeah. So I want to read something here just really quick. So, we call this servant leadership. It's what Jesus taught us. Servant leaders refuse to compromise their integrity. They set an example, and they admit their mistakes and are forgiving of others.
Yep.
You guys just did that in the last 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Yeah. No.
And I didn't read that, right? So your forgiveness, I got chills. Right? I literally got chills when you talked about making the phone call and forgiving your stepdad. Right? Admitting their mistakes. You're living it.
Yeah. Right.
What is your message to people? Like, tell me why like, this term it kind of bothers me a little bit, right?
Around.
It gets thrown around.
Everybody wants to be a servant until you're treated like one, you know?
Exactly, right?
Then not so much.
Yeah. So this is important to me because like, I hear so many people in the community, like, you know, talk is cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. I hate the term, and I say hate lightly, but, it's the thought that counts. No, the thought doesn't count. The action counts. You can think about doing something all day long, but until you put action to it, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So.
What about you, Eric? Sorry.
No, you're good. No, servant leadership.
It almost sounds like it doesn't even go together.
It does sound like a contradiction, but it's really not. Because to be a good leader in any avenue, you have to lead by example. And that means being out in the front and doing the things that you want people to emulate. So if you can't go out and do the things that you're asking people behind you, that you're asking to follow you to do, they're not going to know how to do it. And that's just kind of how I started my business. I taught my guys, you know, this is how I want you to do it. And it's the same thing applies in the spiritual world. You can teach people, look, this is, you know, you got to pray, you got to do this, but you also got to serve. You got to come here, you got, you know, shovel the snow, you know, clean the toilets, whatever it takes to keep this building running so we can help reach more people. That's part of being a servant leader. And if you can't show it, you're not going to have people that do it. Yep. Period.
Yeah, and I believe in that. Like, if I'm not willing to do something myself, right, and serve others, like, I mean, how can I expect them to do it?
Yep. And
right?
I think as a leader, when they can see that you're a servant and you have no problem doing that, it takes you down off of this pedestal, especially in the church. It just drives me crazy. Like, okay, my pastor is a real person. He will tell you, like, he's so transparent, like he's just one of us. And I think because we saw that, we can be that too. And I want people to be able to approach me. I don't want people to be afraid to come to me or, oh, you don't have time for me. No, I do have time for you. And so if they can see me out here, you know, guess what? Work the nursery, teach the Sunday school class, and then get up on the platform and lead worship. You know, you get this two very different, you know, platforms. Or on Thursday night, I'm out here scrubbing toilets and vacuuming floors. Guess what? It's all being a servant. There's no levels to servanthood. And so, the Bible tells us, when we get to the pearly gates, he'll say, well done, my good and faithful servant. He's not going to call me by my title. Titles don't mean anything to him. He wants to know that you are serving people and you're loving people. They'll know you by your love. And so that is the most important piece of servant leadership that we could possibly have.
Yeah, that's so well said. Okay, I have to go back to this, right? So can you, Eric, you in particular, tell us, it obviously wasn't just you met Carrie and boom, your addiction went away. I want to back up a minute, and I know we only have a couple minutes, but what did that process really look like?
Man, I wish I could really pinpoint it, but honestly, it was almost that simple. Almost. I've really never sat back and trying to analyze the process of where I'm like, man, I got to have this every 4 hours, like medicine, to being free from it. I really never took the time to pinpoint what that looked like and how it really came about. But ultimately, if I had to put a thumbprint on it, it would just be that God provided what I needed. Like my wife said, I had prayed for the Lord because at the time when I was praying this prayer, like she said, I had an accident at Wood Mode. Okay, so this was 20 days before my 21st birthday. I had an accident. I was running a gang rip saw, and if you don't know what that is, I can't really explain it to you. But long story short, a piece of wood came flying out of that machine and hit me right dead center of my safety glasses that I just put on because I felt I needed to. Literally, I'm almost never wearing them, and I just put them on. Lord said, or I'm going to say it was the Lord. Put the glasses on. Not even 5 minutes later, I got hit right in the center of the safety glasses with a board at 161 feet per second. I had a piece go through my shoulder, about a foot long, right into the top. I had a piece hit me right on the collarbone. Had it been any higher, would have stuck right into my jugular. I had multiple lacerations on my face, detached retina, fractured lens, removed most of my iris when they took the wood out, and there was a piece that went 25 feet behind me and stuck into a 2x4 8 inches deep. So to say that the Lord was with me is an understatement. But that was a wake-up call. And I think if I could put a finger on it, that was it. That was part of it, because I'm like, had I died, where would I have gone? Yeah.
Right.
And what would my life look like? Would it be something I would be proud of? And ultimately, the answer was no, because I hadn't really done anything good. I always considered myself a good person. I did, I was kind, and all this stuff. I never stole or did anything like that. But in hindsight, I was not a good person, and I wanted to live a life that was more approved. You know what I mean? And at the time, I really wasn't considering God too much. I didn't really know him at all. I had always had a thought of him, and through the music that I listened to, and believe it or not, the Lord can use secular music to teach you about who he is, and he will, if you listen for him. And I had always seen that drawing on my life through different stuff. And so that incident, I think, definitely is the pinpoint and the turning point when I decided I got to be done with this, because I had tried to quit smoking weed in April, and this happened in June. And but I had literally smoked the day before. So I got, where I could have gotten $1 million settlement, I got $100,000 or something like that, maybe 130. But anyway, I had money in the bank, and I had a car that was paid off. So I was living large, I thought, and I'm like, man, I'm still not happy. Mm-hmm. All this stuff, and it doesn't make a difference. You can have everything in the world and not be happy. Right. Mm-hmm. Until the Lord sent me my wife, and I knew, I remember leaving her house as I was getting ready to go to work, and I just knew. I just cried. I'm like, Lord, she's the one. And I just cried all the way to work that night. And I was like, thank you, Lord. And it was just like a switch flipped, and I just didn't have desire for it anymore, and I can attribute that to just the series of events that led up to it, and the conscious decisions to each day make the right decision to not do it again. You know what I mean? Each day we should strive to be better than we were the day before.
What a great story. And sometimes it takes something like that, you know, an event like that. I have an odd question. Do you feel like weed is addictive?
Not necessarily that it's, man. I think,
right? I'm not trying to interrupt you, but like this is a hot topic right now, and everybody's kind of, you know, it's legalized, and you know, I have this.
We have.
I just want your opinion.
There's coffee in this cup,
and I have an addiction to it too. Yeah.
So we all have addictions. Yeah. So yeah, I would say yes.
Okay.
I think anything that you put above anything else is an addiction. If it's something that's on your mind all the time, something that you need to function. This could be that for all of us.
Okay.
But we categorize these addictions. Well, this is just a little addiction. Well, is there really a little one? I don't know, you know.
Right. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Well, listen, this was an awesome interview. I think folks are going to find great inspiration in your story. Also, I think it's cool that you're going to be in our community. Yeah. And I think we're going to impact folks. We have listeners all over the world, honestly. And there are many communities like Shamokin struggling with the same exact things. Yeah. And listen, we know it's not just Shamokin, right? It's Sunbury, it's Philadelphia, it's everywhere. But I think, you know, what I take from this is the vulnerability, admitting kind of who you are, who you were. And I love that you have a vision of what you're doing with your life now. So I truly, truly appreciate it. And I can't wait to see the work that you do. And I want to be a part of your community, Definitely. You know, moving forward. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's been an honor.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Chad, what an amazing interview with Eric and Kari Boyer. What are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts? I hope to share the same thoughts as all of our viewers out there. An emotional story from both sides. Crazy adversity. I mean, I didn't experience any of that, but listening to their story, I felt like I have. I mean, it was so powerful, and you know, I don't know if I would have had the strength to do that. But it's an honor and a pleasure to meet people who have.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I choked up a little bit, you know, especially when Carrie was talking, and the fact that, you know, she had the strength to forgive her abuser. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't even comprehend that. But she said it with such calm and confidence, and, you know, Eric supported her in that. And that's the lesson that, you know, I think we all can take home is, man, if she can forgive, we all can forgive
for
folks
sure
within our lives, you know?
Yeah. And my problems, you know, my problems are just like, you know, what am I complaining about?
Exactly. You know? I mean, it's truly the reason why we're doing this podcast, to learn. And how about Eric's vulnerability in admitting that he was dealing drugs and he was in the city, you know, held at gunpoint. This is what happens when you get into that lifestyle, and he doesn't hold back. And I think it's refreshing, and I think people can learn from him. And I think he's going to have a great impact on the community when he can be like, hey, I was that person and look at who I am now.
Just to mentor people that might be going through it right now, to see someone make it through the fire like that and thriving. And like, really amazing.
You're a big proof in your pudding guy, right?
I love the proof in the pudding.
You're not a big fan of somebody who tells you what to do that hasn't done it themselves.
Correct.
And you've said that, and I'm kind of the same way, right?
Yeah.
And I think that he has proof in his pudding to go make a difference and truly sit across the table from somebody dealing with these things and trying to help them get better and have a better life.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. It's truly awesome what they're doing. Now, here's the deal. Everybody throws around the term servant leadership. Our leadership topic of the day is that servant leadership, how to become a better and how to become a servant leader. And I was joking with them because I read on everybody's LinkedIn profile and every bio, and everybody's a servant leader now, right? That's what they lead with. So I've aggregated again some tips. Again, these aren't my tips, as you all know. These are tips that I've aggregated from multiple sources on how to be a servant leader. Sound good?
Do you need a drum roll?
I do need a drum roll.
I don't have a drum roll.
Okay, no drum roll today. So number one, you need to be a strong decision maker. To be a servant leader, you need to understand that, you're not going to make everybody happy. Okay. You might need to make an unpopular decision, but you know that it's the right decision for the whole. And that could be your community. That could be your team. That could be your business. And when you do that, people are going to see like, okay, they have what it takes to make us a better community, a better business, a better team. Okay.
And take credit for the right decision, obviously, but also take credit for the wrong decision.
That's exactly it, right? And that's what a servant leader does. You have to have emotional intelligence. I don't know if people realize this, but you can be an empathetic leader, and you need to understand the needs of others, right? A great leader listens really well and takes others' perspectives into consideration. Okay. You have to have that EQ. Some people have great high IQs and they're really, really smart, but they're terrible leaders. So sometimes the smartest person in the room isn't always built to be a servant leader. Just like sometimes the best athletes in sports don't make great coaches because they'll be like, oh, just do this, but they can't teach somebody else how to do it.
It's my way or the highway.
Yeah. So we really need to have some emotional intelligence. Number three, you need to know how to build a community. Okay. You need to be able to build up people around you.
Build up a culture.
Build up a culture, right? If you don't do that, you're not a servant leader. If you're just sitting there with your title and you're not actually with the people on your team or in your business, and you're just sitting up in the corner office, not getting down and dirty with your workers, you're not a servant leader. You can put it on your resume, you could put it on your title, but like, I'll give you an example. For my company, I told you guys previously, I still make sales calls, right? I don't sit here and say, I'm done with that. Right. I get on the phone and I got told to get a real job last week
by
a lead, like my call. I called and I was like, hey, I saw this ad. And the lady just goes, just go get a real job and stop calling me. Right. That's true. But I still am willing to do it. Right. She had no clue who was on the other end of the phone. Yeah. So that's the stuff that my sales guys deal with daily. All right. I was willing to be told to get a real job. I'm willing to be hung up on. Okay. You have to have some self-awareness, right? You have to be conscious of how your behavior affects the whole culture. If you fly off the handle, everybody thinks that's appropriate, and then they fly off the handle. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you really need to be aware of that. And then lastly, commitment to others. I think that's what we learned from Carrie and Eric. They are literally committed to serving others. They are servant leaders. They're existing, right, to build a church so that people can walk into a judgment-free zone and be like, Pastor Eric, you were addicted. I'm addicted. Can I talk to you? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's all about other people for them, right?
I'm really excited for both of them. Really, really are. I think they're going to do really, really well. They already have done really, really well, but now they're coming into the coal region, and I believe it is a much needed service. And
it's going to be a struggle for them, right? I mean, we know, we've been there. I was there, last night. I was a part of a group, through the Rotary that we met and had a meal and fed some folks in town, and it's not easy. But I think that they're on a mission, and I think they're going to make a big difference. And Chad, you and I are obviously going to support them in any way we can.
Happy to help wherever possible.
Anything else to add?
All I got to say is the coffee's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Talk about perfection. He asked us about 5 times, Eric did, about, what do we think? How did it taste? Because they are in Trevorton, and they are literally, making the coffee themselves. It's just an awesome process, and they're trying to get the perfect brew.
Well, if it's not perfect, it's darn close.
Yeah.
Again, I like my coffee.
If you're in the area, check out IV Coffee Shop in Sunbury. It's in the train station right along the railroad tracks. You feel like you're in New York City or something. It's a really cool spot.
Lauer, you did it again, my friend.
Yeah, well, you helped, and really can't wait to get started on the next one.
Are you a business owner, a leader, or an aspiring achiever looking to turn life's challenges into powerful fuel for your success? you've come to the right place. Get ready to unlock the secrets to turning life's hardships into your most powerful ally. Your hosts, along with our incredible guests, will help you tap into your own Lauer power and guide you towards the success you've always dreamed of.